agenda, which is we will hear keynote speech from our speaker. But for this session, we'll be guided by our amazing moderator. So let me introduce our moderator today, Dr. Sri Hartono. Hello, Dr. Sri.
Hello, Cindy. How are you today? You look beautiful
Okay.
from here.
Okay. Thank you. I'm good. I hope that you're doing great too there. Okay. Are you ready to
Okay.
be a moderator today, Dr. Sri?
Of, of course, I have prepared for everything to give the best today.
Wow, that's great. I'm so excited. Okay, so for this session, we'll be guided by our moderator. For Dr. Sri Hartono, time and place are yours.
Thank you, Cindy, and also the committee to give the opportunity to be the moderator of today's seminar. Hello, Cindy. How about my voice? Does it sound clear?
Yes, yes, you're audible.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, can you inform that currently I am in Yogyakarta. The weather here is sunny, and I hope the weather where all the participants live is also sunny, making us more optimistic in facing the extraordinary pandemic crisis. Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, honorable speakers, and all seminar participants, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
First of all, I would like to thank you for participating in today's seminar. I'm very honored to be able to accompany all of you. For approximately 2 hours, I will be the moderator of today's seminar. Introduce me, Dr. Sri Hartono. I am postgraduate lecturer at UMP Jakarta and also as a Secretary General of AACIM. Ladies and gentlemen, today we were very lucky because today to meet two very great keynote speakers who are very experienced in their respective field and also very good reputation. Thanks to the Honorable Speaker, Mr. Amir Hamzah Karim, as the Vice President of the Malaysia Chamber of Commerce Malaysia, and also thanks to the Honorable Dr. Bayu Krisnamurthi. Currently, he is as a Chair Commissioner of PT Raja Wali Nusantara Indonesia. In this first session, I will invite Mr. Hamzah Karim to present this his presentation. Assalamualaikum, Mr. Amir Hamzah Karim.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Are you okay today?
Yes, Alhamdulillah. But a bit tight.
Thank you.
Yes,
Yeah.
I have going on now is our digital implementation plan. So we have a meeting currently that is ongoing. So I just excuse myself for 1 hour so that I can be with you all.
Okay, of course. I think maximum that only 1 hour we have your time in this session. Again, thank you very much for your presence as a keynote speaker in this morning. All seminar participants, the title of presentation Mr. Amir Hamzah Karim is The COVID-19 Pandemic, Its Impact on Commerce and Business Management Issues. Do government really help during this crisis? I think this is a very interesting topic. Before presentation, allow me to read a short CV from Mr. Amir Hamzah. Mr. Amir Hamzah is a member of the Executive Council of DPMM, yang dipertua DPMM Negeri Sembilan, member of the EXCO of National Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Malaysia, Managing Director PV Sinergi Sendirian Berhad, Board Member Eco Drive Marketing Sendirian Berhad, and then the founder of a Koperasi Usaha Asas Teknologi Kuat, and also he also involved in entrepreneurship development and entrepreneur training, and also there are many kind of experience, and also have some kind of experiment in maritime industry over 30 years. Mr. Amir Hamzah also graduated from LLB Hons UKM, certified mediator, and also certified knowledge manager USA. All seminar participants, I just want to keep remind during presentation, if you have any question, please write down in the chat column. I will read it after the presentation finished. In the time still available, we will open question and also question and answer session. Okay, time is moving now, and then I will give the floor to Mr. Amir Hamzah. Mr. Amir Hamzah, the floor is yours. Your
Thank
time
you.
only 45 minutes. I think it's enough.
Sufficient. Right.
Okay.
Thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Can you all hear me? Yep.
Yeah, it's clear.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, Datuk Sri Hartono, and the distinguished guests. Ladies and gentlemen, may I proceed with my presentation, my keynote speech. The title that been put to me basically is the COVID-19 impact on the government. Does the government really helps during this crisis? But before we can go further on that part, I think we have to look back where it started and what is the current status of the COVID pandemic in our country and in the world. Let me show you the next slide. So basically on my presentation today, we are talking about the COVID-19 pandemic, the timeline, and the commerce impact, whether it's positive or negative, business management issues, intervention by the government, and nuggets to ponder. So my presentation, at the end of my presentation, I hope that everybody could actually think and review back what are we doing during this pandemic, and what are we going to do after this pandemic, and what are impact things that we think that is possible to do for greatness for our nation. Right, for the next slide. Basically, if we look officially, COVID-19 started in 3rd January 2020 as declared by the WHO. However, if you notice that in China, in Wuhan itself, it started far back in November 2019. Therefore, the impacted in 2020 was only subsequent happening in Wuhan, China. And from the fact that we know until as far as 15 November, the world has already more than 253 million confirmed cases throughout the world and 5 million deaths, roughly about 2% or 3% of the total people infected with COVID-19. And as far as 10th November, a total of 7 billion people, 7 billion doses has been administered to people. So as we go today and tomorrow, yes, as far as yesterday, we can see that although we have a good vaccination turnout, the cases does not decrease at all. And as for example, in Malaysia, I think, as you know, as per yesterday in Malaysia, our R0 was about 1.05. More than 95% are not 0.95%, which has been our benchmark. So therefore, I'd like to invite you all to look at it in comparison of our neighboring partners and neighboring countries of confirmed and death cases. As far as Brunei concerned, they have the least one. Yep. The least one, because of their numbers of population, is roughly about 400, less than 2 million people. So if you look further up, Singapore is having the 4th wave of COVID-19, and they have already doing their circuit breaking. Further, in Thailand, we don't have much news in Thailand. In Philippines, neither in Philippines, and Indonesia plus Malaysia. And if you look at total death numbers in the country, if you look, it's not actually very concerning, because the numbers, if you compare in terms of ratio between the death and the population itself, is roughly 0.002 to 0.001%. But however, since the nature of spread of the disease is a matter of concern, not because of the death. Yeah, the important part as far as the public health concern is the nature of the spread. However, I like you all to look into the important part also of COVID timeline is what is the next in the future. So if you look based on our timeline given under the Spanish flu far back in 1918 and 1919, it takes almost a year for them to actually the Spanish flu being considered as an endemic. And if you look at our position currently, as far as it started in November 2019, and he is far beyond 2020. So it's more than already more than a year. It's coming up to 2 years. Why does this difference between Spanish flu and current COVID-19? Due to the fact that human actually in this modern world, we move from one place to one place easily. Rather than during in 1919, we have issue 1919, we have issues of moving from one place to another. And that facts created more complex for us whether this pandemic will continue beyond 2020. So as I use the icon here, it started on the red one, and we have the pause, the end or the eject. Is it whether we can say that COVID-19 will able to stop in 2023, or it was still within us by 2023. So 2023 will be 2 years from now, and based on my personal view, that the COVID-19 will actually gradually become endemic by middle of next year, 2022, and it will gradually become a normal flu in 2023. Right. So here, bear in mind our timeline that what we see here, none of our country or our government actually put a specific timeline for COVID-19. What we have is how to deal with COVID-19, and phases in COVID-19 action plan is basically on based on not on looking at strategically when it things that we can anticipate or we do forecast when it can clear off from our country. So I would suggest that every people now, for every student, for example, I see here there's many students here that participate in this conference. You have to put in your timeline on these issues of COVID-19. Why? Because it will impact you significantly once you graduated. So from now onwards, you have to actually come to a position to plan what is going on in 2023. Yeah. By 2022, what happened in 2021 will continue until 2022. So, but beyond 2022, if you are graduating in 2022 and 2023, you have to think of what are you going to do and what kind of position or job creation or businesses that you are going to take. So let's go to the next one. Now, COVID-19 actually impacted four things, basically in 4 areas. One is the people, second is the government missionaries, third is the economic contributors, and also other countries, either neighbors or the countries that we have bilateral trade and etc. So if we look at the position of COVID-19 impact on people, first it create a restless people, restless and I mean COVID-19 actually create a great concern about people. Into it actually divided people into 2 categories. If you look the concern of people, it created through vaccination. So vaccination actually create, one is called so-called, we call it anti-vaxxers, and another one is the vaccine propagators. So if you look, COVID-19 actually make people into two categories, and that categories will create some sort of discrimination within parties. So that will create tension, and this tension will create further implication towards the livelihood of the people. Second part, as for the government, although the process, I mean, we cannot deny that the government machineries is come from the people itself. So it created also tension among the government machineries. And further, COVID-19 actually tests the readiness of the country to be run during crisis. So COVID-19 actually reflects and shows us clearly whether whatever our propagation or position that our government had set before, whether they are really ready for this particular COVID-19 or this crisis. This can be shown towards the health preparedness in mitigating the COVID-19. As you see, most countries in the world, when COVID-19 at the peak, the spread disease of COVID-19 at the peak, especially for the Delta variant and Delta plus variant now, the stress be given to the public health is really been tested, because to one level, the country cannot cope with that, and we, the government, need to ask assistance from the people in order to maintain public health order. So here, the stress that given to the government machineries, not only in health, but also in the economy. Because when the government machineries take position, or the government take position in this area, they said, okay, we start to do the lockdown. In some area, they do the circuit breaker, and they do, some of them, they stop the export of the country for certain time. That really impacted how the government assistance to the people. Therefore, it also created another effect to the economic contributors. When I say AMSME meaning that in our definition is atom, micro, small, medium enterprises. So the impact, when the government machineries take a position, they will impact in total and directly impact, either is direct or indirectly, the impact will go to the ASME. Whereas for the multi-tier, they are able to actually cushion up the impact very well. And also, countries to countries relationship also put in stress. For example, until today, what is already almost 2 years from now, we can see our borders is still not open. Although is still partially, or I mean less than 10% open due to certain items. However, it's good that COVID-19 actually transgressed throughout the whole country, that we can able to communicate, able to work through the digital technologies, which far beyond our reach. That we think that the idea of having our conference in digital in 2020, before COVID-19, is not the reality. But now, from the COVID point of view, the impact is very positive, that the digital economy actually transcend about 800% during the March to June 2020. So the adoption of digital technology nowadays, it seems real, and it seems that it really impact the daily livelihood of every people and every person in this earth. So definitely, we cannot run away from the digital impact as we pursue further in our future. Okay, to look whether the impact to the commerce, why I use the word commerce instead of businesses, because the important part of COVID-19, it actually impact the whole commerce ecosystem. If you look at the risk that given to the COVID-19 impact, as what McKinsey and company has already stated in their survey recently, it shows that the first the most impacted is the developing market, that is 72%. Whereas for our side, that is Asia Pacific, is about 60%, and the least impact is Latin America. Why Latin America is the less impact? Because nature of their economy. Basically, they are the real exporters for raw materials rather than involved in commerce and trade per se. Then if you look COVID-19, when the impact from the government through their policies and through the law and order, they actually disrupt the chain of the supply chain. And what is impacted most is the North America. Because North America, second is Europe, and the next one is Greater China. Asia Pacific also been a part of the supply chain in basically on the chips. For example, for the chips, they have this short of supply for components in microchips for more than 9 months back order.
Okay.
So therefore, we can see that not only on microchips or electronics, but also on the food supply chain. Because during the lockdown and also the circuit breaker in some countries, the restriction on the people going to work and etc. actually stopped the economy from going further. Therefore, it created the next level of inflation. If you look at the inflation here, the inflation rate actually increases in North America, that is 38%. Whereas in the countries, for example, like Latin America, which does not, actually they have to, most of their items is imported. So the inflation rate increased 44% in that much. So that also create, if you look also, the inflation actually transcend to the people, and people who actually create domestic political conflicts. So you can see that the domestic political conflicts, especially in Malaysia, is quite rampant. We can see the instability happen in our country. Within 2 years period, we changed our Prime Minister 3 times. So not like Indonesia, you have a good presidency, Dr. Joko and the team. And you can see also that in America, the nature of the political during the Trump era, transition within the Trump to Joe Biden is quite adamant, and the crisis that happened in America is quite hostile. So here we can see also COVID-19 does actually impact the whole scenario, and that scenario actually impacted in a negative way for certain industries or certain economic sectors. However, there's some sectors that actually fruit, or the commerce sector that actually fruit from this COVID-19, especially those who are in the health industries. For example, those who are in the medicine industry, those who are the vaccine producer. Out of sudden, within 3 months period, the numbers of vaccine, if you look at 7 billion vaccine have been administered, about 8 billion vaccine have been administered. The numbers of what they obtain, their revenue from the vaccine is beyond limit, beyond limit. And now there is a booster shot, etc. It will further increase their stake in this area. And further, apart from that, although Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, etc., they are the big players. However, it also created most of the countries currently now aggressively doing their research and finding the right kind of vaccine for them. So this will actually create new areas of which last time the countries think that they don't depend on it. So now it also creates a positiveness for the research and development areas on particular health, especially in public health. And those who are providing the consumable for the PPE, personal protection equipment, such as the coverall, the mask, etc., actually fruitful. So we can see the changes of the domestic, the commerce industry from the negative impact to positive impact in some areas, and in other areas is a negative impact. However, this positive impact can be seen into two areas, into two prong. One prong is that the positive impact actually give the revenue to the economic contributors, for example, for the SME or the multi-tiers or the multinational. Second impact will be creating new industries or new way of doing business. So by having digital during the COVID period, you can see during the pandemic and etc. And until now, as I'm saying today, we can see the positive impact on commerce is that it created new way of doing business. And that new way of doing business create for the consumer will be in a different environment totally. Okay, totally different environment. Whereas in the negative impact, it actually kills the tourist industry, kills the hotels, the hospitality industries, etc. But the positive impact, it created a new bond of industries, which was not beyond, is beyond our thinking at the moment. So I think the overall picture, those impacted positive industry commerce is especially in education too. So if you look, last time we need to go to school, and now the homeschooling was a choice last time, but now homeschooling is a must. So it created a different way of doing business at all. So last time we have private institution that having a lot of private school. Now their school or the way of how they are teaching, the universities, etc., is already from institutionalized in location. Now it's already on your fingertips. So it changed totally, and that actually give an opportunity to create new commerce and new businesses or new ideas on how to put this to the consumer. So at the end of this, if we make a final, either we make at this junction, if we make a final conclusion, whether COVID-19 actually helps pursue new technologies or help new way of doing business, yes, the answer is yes. So any traditional way of doing business currently has been transformed, whether by their choice or not, is being pushed or been forced to transform. If they don't transform, automatically they will become, I think they will become like extinct to one extent. So likelihood or not, that's why I said earlier, for our students, please do bear in mind the changes now. Yeah, the changes now, and think for the future, doing in present. Okay, so I put it in iconic so that it's easier to remember. Okay, the next one is that this is in Malaysia lah. Okay, in Malaysia, just a sample of what is happening. Basically, the impacted is on the business place is that we have demand, and then we have a less demand, then the dampen concern. And you look at what we have really, all the businesses will say that majority of them, yeah, basically 75% of the majority businesses that in Malaysia is having impacted into less. Those who actually fruitful, for example, like the glove, etc., that actually have no bearing, have no impacted on this COVID-19. For example, Malaysia and Indonesia actually fruit from this COVID-19 is that the increase of price of commodity, especially in palm oil. So that is actually a good news for the palm oil producer, but not good news to the producer, to the consumer. Okay. If you look then, what actually we have here is the business issues. The most important part, I mean, throughout here, the important issues on the business people is that first, they affected our manpower. Why? Because the manpower cannot actually come to office and do their work, or come to the farm and do their farming, or go to the factory, etc. because a limitation given by the government, restraining order has been put into place to curtail any spread of disease and movement from one place to another place, and also from one country to another country. So that is another issue. That is the issue. The next issue, that the financial constraint, due to the fact that for those who are in the market industry, the market segment, retail segment, they have this problem of having face-to-face selling in shops. So that actually affected their cash flow very widely. Second, on this financial constraint also, we can see that the banking impacted, although they declared a good profits from our banks in Malaysia, for example. They last March, their profit actually jumped twofold because of the government intervention by giving fiscal and giving moratorium. So that will actually that gives the opportunity for certain segment that actually fruit from this COVID-19. But as a total for the whole business people, their financial constraint and their cash flow constraint is currently at the brink. So, and then we have also the supply chain disruption due to the fact, for example, like Japanese car industries, they rely chip makers in Malaysia to provide them the chip for their cars. However, that has been disrupted due to our lockdown, which we have 3 lockdown in March to June last year, and then in somewhere in November to December. And for this year, we have from May to September. So that actually gives a lot of disruption on the supply chain. Because whenever there is a spread from that particular factory, it will be closed down for 14 days to 21 days. And to restart back the factory, it takes another 14 days before it goes to the optimum. So the question here lies between the supply chain disruption. It goes together with the manpower. And we see the market changes. So as far as the market changes, those who are having day-to-day or face-to-face way of doing business now is totally on digital platform, and that digital platform must be embraced by most of the businesses. And to embrace on this digital is not cheap. So it goes again, it will affect the financial constraint. And furthermore, the market changes when going to digital, it impacted greatly our infrastructure, where it goes and how the infrastructure is able to sustain the influx or the influx numbers of people using it. And then we also have that market changes when new law and order come into picture. So trade liberalization, for example, like Malaysia, Indonesia, etc., we are under RCEP and under RCEP, which will be coming into force 1st January 2022. And that also will create it will affect our way of doing business, the way that the market changes, and also how we are going to pursue further on our market supply chain movement. So this really would affect the whole scenario and further affect the consumer on obtaining services and products in the next year. Either the import will be cheap, or either being made domestically is cheaper, or the people who are going to export will actually gain. So we have yet to see the cost benefit impact on this RCEP. However, it's been shown to us that the RCEP will actually enhance our bilateral. Now it's become multilateral, and ability for exporters to export and import, and our importers to actually fulfill. And the ultimate view is that the consumer will benefit, but that is yet to see. Second part on this new law and order also, we can see the CTPP. The CTPP is comprehensive trans partnership program which consists of 12 countries, and Malaysia is a part of it. And we are in the midst of ratification to ratify it in our parliament. So there's a cost and there's a ongoing movement that the government want to ratify, and the business people are not in favor of ratifying at the moment. Because if you know, COVID-19 actually impacted a lot of domestic industries. And if the domestic industries of each particular countries is not being strengthened, so the way that we go forward by liberalization of our way of doing business will actually not having able to assist our local players, especially those who are in the AMNC, to go further. So that new law and order will actually create a bit of tension among the business people. Apart from that, also new law and order that coming into pictures is that when the government need some unscrupulous, we call it players in the industry that actually, for example, the mask, they sell it at unnecessary, out of portion. The price is too high or too expensive for a mask. So, for example, our mask that been used as a necessity now. So law and order come into the picture and put a stop there and put a shilling price, etc., which been regulated. For example, in Malaysia, it's been regulated. And also for the test kit, at the moment, the test kit at Malaysia currently is selling at 60.19 for the consumer, and now it's been put it down at 6.90. So there's a lot of issues when regulation come into the picture, and it will affect the business per se, as the government sees. The government need to actually look into the way of doing business and also the needs of the people, and whether that need to be balanced out. So if the consumer items or products currently is beyond the reach of the consumer, or only a few types of consumer is able to accept to get the products, therefore the government need to make regulation in order to curtail unprofit, they call it the profiteering by the business people. So one aspect is good for the business people, that they actually make more money. That is the issue. Second part, the regulation that comes into that comes into place, whereas they have already put, for example, those who are involved in the trading of this surgical mask. For example, during the earlier stage of COVID-19 in Malaysia, one surgical mask was sold at $1.50. So now it's already roughly about 35 cents. So that by way of regulation. So there's a positiveness in terms of regulation as the way that the government actually curtail that. And as for businesses, they always think of how to take profit as much as possible at that particular time. So some of them has already imported a lot of masks at the cost. And when they sell it now, when the government curtail it at putting at certain pricing, so they don't actually profit much on that particular place. So that also create a big big discourse between these two parties. So what the government do? So we can put it into three aspects. The government first, they do observation. How they react, they look at observation and they put priority. So what priority? They will look at the medical area. Why at the medical area? Because the concern of COVID-19, it impact the medical sector, medical industries and medical well-being and the health of people. So from that, they do reaction. What they react, they see that whether this reaction is true, they can do that through way of telling people, etc., or through communication, or through by adjusting the way of doing things, etc. However, if that fails, they start to do one thing that is to intervene. So the intervention by the government here will create a lot of a lot of dissatisfaction among the people. So, for example, like they provide restriction. The jail is they provide restriction, and second part they start to do monitoring. That is through your thumbprint or using, like for example, in Malaysia we use My Sejahtera. I think in Malaysia you have one software also, application that actually monitor where are you going, etc. And further your location wise, because that and who are you talking with, because that will actually to know the spread of the disease. So such intervention will actually assist the government to do the observation again on whether the spread of the of this disease COVID-19 will actually can be hampered down or can be curtailed down. So the objective of the government intervention is always to ensure that the people is at the balance is between the business and the people. So here we can see that when there's a intervention, there's always a reaction. So that reaction will be communicated two ways between the government and the people and the business people. For example, for us in Malay Chamber, we have been assisting government in a lot of, since the day one of COVID-19, on a lot of engagement on how to curtail and how to assist the government and the people to flow through this, to get through this COVID-19 pandemic or endemic in the future. So through observation and through learning of what the historical has shown to us, so it gives us the perspective on how and strategically and how and tactically how we can address these issues. But we also must bear in mind, current way of government is doing is basically they are looking at and current matters that is present and not beyond future. So as far as people, as far as business people, we are looking at future. So in mid-term to long-term, because the impacted in mid-term and in long-term will have the indication of what we are going to do at present. So that is what is going on, and likely whether we like or not, that is the way of doing business nowadays. So the most important part at the end of the day of all this intervention by the government and etc. is the way of how it's being communicated. So if we being communicated in a harsh way, the reaction will be in harsh. So if they communicated is in a very subtle way, so the reaction will be very subtly. So this important intervention or idea observation or reaction of the people and the government, we have to bear in mind. The most important part at the end of the day, whether the country can survive or go through this COVID pandemic or the crisis that happening now swiftly, or a lot of obstacle and will actually hamper our future growth. So that is the contention, or that is what is really in mind in all our policymakers and people per se. So if we want to go progress further, we have to bear in mind and in doing way of finding a new synergy way of doing things. So nowadays we cannot say that the government is right or the people is right. The most important part is the three parties, the people, the business, and the government need to sit down and synergize whatever information, whatever data they have to look into the betterment of the future generation. That is the supposedly the main concern of what we are doing at present. Okay, the next one is the nuggets. Yeah, I'm going to end my presentation with nuggets for you all to ponder. So the challenges, whether now or ahead, there's I already concluded 5. The most important part is the livelihood. Yeah, the livelihood. So the livelihood of people is important. Either you are a business people or you are a government servant, the most important is livelihood. So if there is unrest in our country, the livelihood will be disrupted abruptly. if there is a economic downturn, also it will affect our livelihood. So that's why I said it need like a symbiosis between all these three elements of the economy, so that it works together. And second part, we have law and order. Basically, law is being implemented. By the decree of the president, or by Malaysia, by the parliament, and etc. But however, the law being made by the parliament, the most affected people is the order. What I mean is order. Order is being made by the subsidiaries, machineries of the government. For example, we have the ministries that make the law, and we have agencies that created the order. So some of the orders, for example, is not in line with the law is being made. For example, those who are in the one of the unique example is during the restriction, because in Malaysia, I just share you what is happening in Malaysia. We have phases 1, 2, 3, and 4. The National Security Council have come up the SOPs, what we can do. However, some of the local authorities, they implement new laws, new orders to that particular orders, and create confusion. So people start to confuse, and the business people also confuse on which is to follow. So that confusion create unnecessary wasted energies and created wasted time and money and cost to everybody. So therefore, when we are looking at law and order, people can say about law, but don't forget about the order, because the order really impacted us directly. And the second part, and the third part, the challenges also, it creates social interaction and interaction. So among the family members, when you are in the lockdown, etc., it creates tension too, because previously maybe the family is not seated 24 hours together for more than 2 days or 3 days. But now, during lockdown and circuit breakers, you have to sit down together as a family unit is more than a month, 30 days. That clearly creates stress. And furthermore, you cannot go out from your house in terms of lockdown, etc. And that create a lot of stress. And when you hear news, for example, the family hear news that some of their relatives, some of their dear ones is having, for example, we have death news, we have people who are convicted with COVID-19 and they cannot visit, and etc. That create unnecessary stress in the interaction of the social unit of of society. So, and also now from that also, we also don't interact with our neighbors. So we need a platform to interact. Therefore, like Zoom meeting, Google Meet, and etc., that actually able, although it cannot fulfill 100% social interaction, but it creates some kind of interaction, although only in virtually. So that will actually able to fit in to our way of doing things. And as you can see also, changes done by Facebook when they are currently in doing the R&D and further on making virtual as virtually itself, which the technology currently they are developing, and they say they will be able come into commercial or come to consumer by 2023. So that's not long. That is only 1 year from now. So we can see that if that really happen, so we can see movies like Gattaca or the Jackson families, etc., is a reality into picture. And the fourth challenges that comes now and ahead is psychological. Whether we like it or not, it impacted the way of how we think, the way how we feel, and the way how we actually react. And that psychology impact has a significant impact for the people, for the policymakers, and also for the business people. So we have to maintain a certain decorum or the certain way of doing business, or a certain way of we doing things, so that it doesn't impact our psychologically unnecessarily create depression, create a lot of, for example, what we have here, during this COVID period, we have 80,000 divorce cases happening in Malaysia within a period of 6 months. So that is almost high, 80,000 divorce cases. Because why? Due to the social interaction and interaction that create unnecessary stress on their psychologically, and that psychology impacted their relationship, and that relationship becomes sour and etc. So this is what whether we like it or not, we have to manage and to understand further on the psychology of the people. And the last part that I would like to look into is the challenges of financial. The way that we do business nowadays, last time, except in China, China has been doing it all the way by using digital through their WeChat and Alipay. And now further in Malaysia and Indonesia, we are starting to use and embracing all this. And the financial way of doing things also, we see the inflation rate is getting higher, and that will create more. We need more. The way how we spend, we must plan it properly. And also during this crisis, also we can see debt actually increases, whether it's official debts or unofficial debts. When we call it unofficial debts, meaning that the loan between family members, or loan within the friends, loan within the underworld loans, where in Malaysia we call it alongs, actually increases. And how to do with that? And that financial impact overall will impact us further, and we can see that. And I personally look at it, it will impact and significantly in year 2023. We can see the impact. For example, now we can see the ripple happening there, where we can see the numbers of people being declared bankrupt, or companies winding up. Last time before 2019, every day was about 25 cases. Now the increase is already about 45 cases per day. And we anticipate by next year, after the moratorium ends by end of this year, we can see there's a jump in March to onwards into 70 to 80 cases per day. And we can see that further bankruptcy cases, currently we are about 400,000. We can increase into maybe 1 million. So that financial impact will not only impact on the whatever the consumer have money to spend, but only on the safekeeping of the money. As you can see that in Malaysia, a total of 110 billion has been taken out from our KWSP, that is Kumpulan Wang Simpanan. That is the money being put aside for our old age to use. So 110 billions, and it involved about 6.9 million contributors. So now we are using our future money to be spent now, the present, because to sustain our living. So this financial impact will actually create further stress and further challenges to our psychology, social, and etc. So what we can do now? So COVID-19 for us in Dewan Melayu, we propose to the government, we need to reset the whole thing. So we have to reset. Whether we like it or not, we have to press this button, reset. And for all my, to all my distinguished students, etc., I think it's high time for us to reset, because without resetting and let it be as what it is, the futures that what has been transgressed for almost 100 years, from 1918 to 1990, shown a different perspective. For example, let me share you a history of monetary. During 1918 to 1919, our monetary was backed up by gold. Yeah, it's again gold. But in 1971, under Bretton Woods, we changed our backup not using gold itself. So actually in 40 years, almost 50 years from now. It happens now is 47, 49 to 40 years. So the way of how we treat the economy has already changed a lot. So therefore, we have to relook back and reset back whether this is the right way of doing things, because to go further, it will actually create unnecessary inflation and unnecessary insecurity, of the livelihood of everybody, and it not only for the people, not only for the government, but also for the people, because at the end of the day, the people will suffer. So the people is you and me. So we have to think carefully whether to pursue or to still proceed with the same way of doing business, the same way of our underlying fundamentals that we are using now. So let us do some resetting on these particular areas, because if we still keep further doing this, I don't think so the future is bright enough for the people, but will be bright enough for certain class of people.
Okay.
Right? So we have another thing is that the COVID-19, I just put it here to ponder, start in November 2019, progressively in 2020, and further heightened it up in 2021. And in 2022 is still, we are able to manage it, manageably, and become endemic, perhaps. So we hope it will end in 2023. So this timeline, if we are in agreement, we have to use this timeline to start to do our planning to in accordance to this planning. Otherwise, it will disarray our planning at all. So, and
Amir, your time, please.
Yeah. The last one is that what happened now is that we have to bear in mind this mechanism. The biggest risk is to the domestic growth. So the important part, although we go for liberalization, domestic growth is very important to sustain in any crisis. And we can see that the COVID-19 has already proved that if you don't have a strong domestic growth or domestic domestic investment, DDI in domestically, you are not able to sustain, where every country actually stop giving their helps to other people. So that happened clearly during the February to March to September last year, when most of the countries stopped giving their vaccine, and everybody is for themselves first. So that we have to bear in mind. Although it's a 9 month how they're doing things, but that actually impacted a lot of countries throughout the world. So with that adieu, that is important part is what is our take in this pandemic crisis, and to answer the question that I posed earlier, whether the government really helps. Yes, to one extent, and they also to one extent they helps, but to one extent they also threat. It's a threat. So we have to take precaution and caution a way of how we dealt with this crisis, whether it's by intervention by using law or order, or we should go on mutual respect of each other to come the way to reset ourselves in those 5 challenges that have been put forward. So to that adieu, I think the very big question for us, what are we going to do? So the important part is the finding the balance, and therefore I say thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Amir Hamzah, for your really extraordinary presentation today. Actually, we have some kind of constraint time because now already 9:56. But before that, I have a few questions for you, because I looking in the column chat, still there is no question. You mentioned it that intervention from the government mostly just a reaction instead of the preparation. And then you also mentioned that pandemic will end on 2023. What will happen if the pandemic will longer than 2023? Is there any suggestion or something to the government?
For us, as in Malay Chambers, we did suggest to the government to look beyond that. We say that in 2023, we anticipate, based on historic what happened in Spanish flu and what happened to the economic crisis, etc. We take into pictures. We say that the pandemic of COVID-19, I mean, in terms of the spread disease by itself, will end by 2022. And however, we still have to manage ourselves. In terms of economy-wise, the movement of our economy will actually impact it up to 2024. So by 2023 is actually we are just on the recovery stage. So that is why we said the government doesn't actually. If you look at our budget, none of the issues of this. I mean, in Indonesia you can also look, and in Malaysia also we have already looked. The budget doesn't actually look into pandemic issues. Crisis that are happening in our countries. So it seems that we are talking about new norms, but the way that we are putting our plan in is just like just before. So nobody actually really want to think of the crisis, because we want to try to think positive. Thinking positive doesn't mean that we cannot take the unnecessary, the negative thing into our positivity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that is one part that we propose to the government, and we propose to everybody, and I've been propagating to people also. I said, be ready by 2023. We cannot say by next year, because we said by 2024, then only. Because if you look at the history, in 1918 and 1919, when 1919 the pandemic ends, so-called ends in Europe and America, it's follow up in 1923. After that is the Great Depression in 1924.
Okay.
Right. So actually, that Great Depression happening in America and then further in Europe and etc. That is nothing. That happening doesn't have much impact, because last time the trans-border crossing between countries to countries is not much. But nowadays, our movement within one country to another country is so great, So our bilateral movement of our economy, it stops to a certain extent. Like, for example, if you look at last year, the ships cannot actually come berthing to the ports to deliver their goods, because it thinks that it will actually spread the disease. So this is the issues that we have to think of. So the future is not, I mean, bright. It's very bleak.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think, okay. Thank you very much. I think it's clear. Well, again, because of constraint of time, Mr. Amir Hamzah, I think we will close with this session, because we will continue with another presentation. If you still available time, I think you still can join with us until the end of the second keynote speaker.
Yeah, I will. I will close my video. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I like to thank for the secretariat and the distinguished for listening to my what I have represented. And I hope that if you have any questions or any discourse that we can actually discuss, please do contact me as inside my slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Amir Hamzah, for your participation and support to us. Again, thank you. We can meet another occasion. Thank you very much.